Okay, so today is May 2nd, it's 12:30. This is a Police Oversight Board Policy and Procedure Subcommittee meeting. Present is myself, Dr. Cass, Ed Harness of the CPOA, Trina Segal of the CPOA, Dan McDermott of the CPOA, Chantal Galloway is present by phone. All right, now let's move back then to 27518. I don't think I've seen that. I need to download that. Okay, so so this is the policy recommendations coming from the investigation in case 275-18 pertaining to all the overtime issues that were discovered in that investigation. It looks like there is an
This is the letter from the chief.
Oh, this is from the chief. Okay.
Right.
So, I don't know. I'm wondering, I think we definitely need to make some recommendations, but I'm wondering, like CPOA, do you feel as though the recommendations have been made just by virtue of sending the letter to the chief? Or is this a separate process that and what do you think, Bill? What do you think, Chantal? Everybody, what do you guys think?
I think that this is the beginning of, I think that the CPOA investigation and letter to the chief was the beginning of the process. And I think now, if the response from the chief says, it deals with both the issue of the officer involved, and it then deals extensively with the policies involved. And he said that he's going to start down the path of making policy changes. And I think at this point, we have to wait, we have to be responsive to what they do. We don't initiate what they do. I think they have to initiate their changes, and then I think it's at some point when they get this to OPA, or they circulate some kind of a draft of changes or a plan associated with how they're going to change, then we can weigh in and say we want to be part of this process. And well, I think we have to wait for them to make the next move, which is to look at to follow through on the changes that they've identified already. Okay? It's their process.
You agree with that, Chantal?
Yeah, almost 100%. I just think that our letter to the chief was actually that first step. That's the only difference. Like, I think that we kind of skipped the P&P committee piece of this, and the board moved as a whole to make these recommendations about SOPs to the chief that he has in his letter and in his press releases, responded to those recommendations, acknowledged that there are issues and that they're going to be looking at that. So I think we're just kind of in a holding pattern until they make it to OPA.
Okay, what do you think, Director Harness?
I think the fact that the chief has responded to the recommendations in the letter shows that the letter itself served as the recommendations of the board as it was voted upon. The letter was inclusive of the investigation and recommendations. And I think the chief's response reflects the fact that he's acknowledged those recommendations and have taken them not under advisement, but acknowledges that changes have to be made, and has pledged to keep the CPOA in the loop as they make the changes as he's proposing them, along with the Appendix A, which were incorporated into their budget request.
Okay. Well, it sounds like everyone essentially thinks that we have made our recommendations and that we have our response. My question then like, the one thing that concerns me is, like, you know, we saw in that investigation that one part of the problem was that some of these issues had been previously identified, and there were promises made to change the SOP or enforce the SOP, and those things didn't happen. And I'm wondering if, like, in some way we need to be the overseers of these, you know, of the promises made in this memo. Because, like, the difference, you know, when the board writes a letter as opposed to, you know, changes coming through the actual investigation, then we get to say, you know, pursuant to the ordinance, please respond, like, by this certain time. We get sort of, I think, a little bit more, I don't know, like a more solid confirmation that things are happening, as opposed to, you know, some assertions that things will happen, and then if they don't, we may not know, we may not be paying attention if the item isn't regularly on our agenda. And we would fail to follow up just because of that, like, logistical issue. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I think we're not quite in that position of anticipating, of overseeing something to make sure it does happen. I think we're in a responsive mode to where it has to first happen, and then we respond to what they bring, what their changes are. But unless it becomes obvious that they're not following the schedule that they laid out, and I think we're obligated to keep track of it, and I think that's essentially what you're addressing. That if they've said we're going to make some changes and we're going to have them completed by the end of the summer, I think, or some time like that, and it hasn't, we don't see any progress toward them, we really have to wait almost till the deadline has occurred, or we have to have some kind of informal contact to ask what's going on.
Okay.
I have there's one other issue that I'd like to address with this, and that is, I didn't notice any mention of one of the issues that was raised by the investigation, or by the letter, which was the cost of the chief's overtime to the city versus what the businesses that hired chief's overtime were actually paid. And I think that, there's plenty of formulas for for determining those kind of costs. And
Yeah.
businesses spend a lot of time determining what their lower salaries are, and I think that needs to be something that should be addressed within this policy, and I didn't see that in the chief's letter, although I can read it. I may have missed it, but anyway, I think that's an issue that should be brought up again if the chief hasn't responded to that.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. As I think I prefaced in my email acknowledging receipt of the letter, that this is only a partial response. It doesn't address the issue of the supervisor in the case as well. And I think that the examination of whether or not the chief's overtime program adequately compensates the city for the resources that it utilizes is a question that is not answered in that response.
Okay, should we then, I mean, do we wait to see, I mean, essentially, we've kind of told the chief that we are awaiting more response as it pertains to Lieutenant M, as it pertains to the billing and expenses of the chief overtime program. Should we wait for that second, I mean, give him an opportunity? Because I could see, I mean, we could just decide right now to just write a recommendation that acknowledges, that most of what we gave him policy suggestion-wise has been examined and scheduled, but, you know, they overlooked or it did not include the chief's overtime, and we would we could just decide to make a recommendation to that extent right now. It would be easy to do. Or alternatively, we could wait and see if, you know, they do that on their own in the secondary response we're waiting.
I think there's some middle ground. I think we could raise the issue at the POB meeting and say we had a discussion about this, and we noticed this was missing from the chief's response. We would just like to bring the issue, call the issue to the attention of the department from a full board, and do it as a report. And I mean, I still think to call anything a recommendation is premature. I mean, I don't think we're in a position to make any kind of recommendation now. I think we have to wait for a more formal response. I mean, he said, here's what we're going to do, but they obviously need time to do that, and it's a complicated process. So,
I just disagree with that piece of it, because the board, as part of the investigation and the response, the findings letter, there were recommendations that were made, and the board approved those recommendations. And I'm of the opinion that those recommendations have been responded to by this letter and the press statement from the chief, and now we're at that point. Like, I think we've already jumped ahead a couple of steps, because it didn't come to P&T first.
No, I think we're talking about just one very specific item that came through the investigation, and that wasn't responded to here, right?
And for that one, I think that I would prefer giving them the opportunity first. The same emails like Ed that you sent the other day saying when can we expect the chief's decision on, or when can we expect the chief's decision on Lieutenant M? Just something as innocuous as that, saying, oh yeah, and by the way, when are we going to hear about the rate versus compensation for chief's overtime pay? And give them the opportunity to do that behind the scenes before we call them out publicly at a board meeting. Like, I'd like to give them that good faith.
Oh yeah. Oh, hey, I'm not suggesting calling anyone out. I'm just talking about, are we going to address that's missing by, are we going to just wait and see if it gets resolved on its own? Or are we going to address it on paper? Not in a confrontational way, just in a way that says, hey, we noticed this wasn't in there. Are you planning on addressing this? Something like that, you know. And Dr. Cass is suggesting...
was Bill's recommendation that we do that at the board meeting. Like, I would prefer we not do it at the board meeting. I would prefer to give them the opportunity to do it via email first.
Well, I think, though, that there needs to be, I think the board needs to ask the question as to what's the definition of the audit that's going to be performed by the state. What are the parameters for that audit? Is it inclusive of that issue? So I think that there's questions to be asked by the board, because that state audit and the request that the state made may be inclusive of all that and may answer all of those questions. Aside from that, there was a very specific recommendation regarding the performance of an audit, and I think you could just simply easily ask, is this audit by the state going to be looking into the issues based upon the recommendation as it came from the board? Because those issues were named in that audit request.
As part of what we've already sent to him, though, right?
That's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, I still would prefer to give them the opportunity to answer that by email than say at the board meeting, hey, you didn't answer this. It kind of seems like a little, invite something.
I don't see it though. I think it's just like our regular, that is our forum for talking about this stuff. That's what it's for. And I think we're just asking for clarification on what we got back. I don't think it's a call out whatsoever.
No, I mean, I think we can phrase it in terms of, thank you very much for your response. I mean, we appreciate your willingness to make these numerous policy changes. We're looking forward to more details for the plan, and we've noticed that there are a couple of things that were left out of
It's just questions.
just questions, right?
Yeah.
We just have further questions, but we're so far so good. Let's
Yeah, I
continue
think it's just
let's
a-
continue the dialogue.
Yeah, I think it's a dialogue also.
Yeah, okay, if that's what you guys want to do, I just think it could be done via email behind the scenes, but.
Yeah, I don't
It
know.
has to be, I think the board.
I think we have to do
the
stuff
full
in
board has to
public
ask
channel.
those questions.
Has to be- right,
It has to
that's
be
good,
done,
right.
it has to be done by the full board in an open meeting.
Yeah,
The board's already done that. The board has already done that.
But if there's
They did
questions,
that last month. We're just following up, and you were following up in the same way that you did with this email. When can we expect a decision on Lieutenant M? When can we expect a decision on the audit? When can we expect blah, 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 blah?
well, if,
It's no different.
but if there's no response regarding Lieutenant M by the board meeting, I would expect that the board would ask that question.
I would too, but we've given them the opportunity. That's the difference. I'm not saying that I wouldn't either. We just have given them the opportunity. We've given that good faith gesture. We've made that good faith gesture.
okay.
Well,
Well,
we can keep making gestures though, because that's our job.
yeah,
Well, I think we're obligated to ask the questions.
I
How
don't,
we ask the questions is very important, but I think we get to ask the questions.
okay.
I agree.
Well, I don't think that there's really anything to vote on. I mean, what I was thinking when I put this on the agenda was that we needed to do a secondary breakdown of all the recommendations that were in that letter and send it through that kind of board to chief channel. But since we don't need to do that, then I think that we just kind of move on to the next item.
So how are you going to address this?
Yes, it's just been resolved, discussion. It was resolved through discussion. Okay, other business. Does anyone have any other business?
Nope.
Okay. Our next meeting is June 6th at 2019 at 12:30 p.m. Would anyone like to move to adjourn the meeting?
I move we adjourn.
Okay, I second the motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thanks, guys.
Bye, thank you.
I'm gonna be in Turkey on June 6th.
In Turkey?
In Turkey. On my way to Greece.
How long will you be out there
Nice.
for? Cass? How long will you be out there for?
But almost 2 weeks. Yeah, right. I mean, we're gonna go to Istanbul for 3 days before, and then we got a tour that we're going with in Greece.
I hear Istanbul is a really cool city.
Yeah, so as soon as the subcommittee met, and Anthony recalled all the lines from all songs written 40 years ago. And so there's Constantinople, you know, so.
So for the agenda?
So has the state auditor requested information from ABQ?
Yeah, that's fine.
And then just list
On
2-8
the
and-
overtime?
Yeah.
I don't know. You
Well,
asked-
is that what's
Or
in
how do
this
you want
letter?
it?
I heard you guys
Yeah.
On the
talking about
agenda.
something
I think
about,
that's
Something
totally
about
I'll just
sufficient.
put recommendations for MOU, pawnbrokers 2-8.
I mean, I don't know where it's,
Yeah.
is it in
Exactly.
the,
Yeah, thank
this
you.
is the,
can I have this? Can I take photographs of it? This is
Not
public
just
record.
it is now,
Not at this
right?
point, no, it's not public.
I'm sorry, then
I'm sorry. Why isn't this a public record?
You could request through,
Well, yeah,
because we have to keep it
I don't understand why this is
documented
a public
of
record.
who's requesting the information.
Well, if I violated something, I'm sorry, I did, but I thought from your last email.
Well,
this
the question I'm asking right now, has the state auditor asked APD for information?
Yes.
And is it just concerning their overtime practices or
It was specific to the case.
specific to this case?
That's correct.
Okay, great, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Good. Tell me what I did wrong here.
We could talk about it.
Okay, all right.
I'm gonna